Alia turned the key in the lock. The old wooden door creaked open. The house smelled stale and musty. Dust covered everything. Alia stepped inside. She was all alone. Alia's grandmother had vanished without a trace. No one knew what happened to her. Alia was supposed to sell the old house, but first she wanted to look around. Maybe she could find a clue to her grandmother's disappearance. The house was big and rambling. It had dark, narrow hallways. The furniture was old and dusty. Cobwebs hung from the ceilings. Alia wandered from room to room. She felt uneasy, like she was being watched. The sun began to set. Shadows crept across the floor. Alia shivered. She decided to leave. She would come back in the morning. The next morning, Alia returned to the house. She started in the attic. It was dark and dusty up there. Old boxes and furniture were piled everywhere. Alia coughed as she moved through the room. She found an old wooden chest. It was tucked under the eaves. Alia knelt down and opened it. Inside, she found old clothes and books, and a small silver-framed mirror. The mirror was ornate. It had a delicate handle. Alia picked it up. It was heavier than it looked. She wiped the dust off the glass with her sleeve. Her reflection stared back at her. For a moment, she thought the reflection moved. Alia shook her head. It was just her imagination. Alia couldn't stop thinking about the mirror. She didn't know why. It was just a mirror, but she felt drawn to it, like it was calling to her. She went back to the attic that night. She sat down on the floor with the mirror in her lap. The house was silent. Alia held her breath. She thought she heard something. A whisper. It was faint, but it was there, coming from the mirror. Alia held her breath again. She listened closely. "Alia!" The whisper came again. Alia gasped. She dropped the mirror. It landed on the floor with a thud. Alia scrambled back. Her heart pounded in her chest. She stared at the mirror. It was just a mirror. Alia took a deep breath. She reached out and picked it up. The whispering had stopped. Alia stared at her reflection. It was her. But there was something different about her eyes. They seemed darker, emptier. "It's just my imagination," Alia whispered. She turned away from the mirror. She was being silly. There was no one in the attic but her. Alia took a deep breath and turned back to the mirror. She jumped back. The reflection was not her own. It was a ghastly face, pale and gaunt, with wide, staring eyes. Section 5. Trapped. Alia screamed. She tried to drop the mirror, but she couldn't. It was like it was stuck to her hand. She tried to pry her fingers loose, but they wouldn't budge. The face in the mirror grinned at her. "You're mine now," the reflection hissed. Panic surged through Alia. She thrashed and pulled, but it was no use. The mirror was holding her tight. She was trapped. The mirror began to glow. A cold, eerie light emanated from it. Alia felt a sharp pain in her hand. She looked down. The mirror was sinking into her skin. At Section 6. A desperate struggle. "Let me go!" Alia screamed. But her voice seemed to be swallowed by the mirror. She could feel her energy draining, being pulled into the cold glass surface. She clawed at her hand, trying to pry the mirror away, but it was no use. It was like it was a part of her now. The fear intensified. Alia knew she had to escape. But how? She looked around the attic, searching for anything to help. Her eyes fell on a dusty old book lying on a nearby trunk. Maybe it held some answers. With her free hand, Alia lunged for the book. She grabbed it, flipping through the brittle pages. They were filled with strange symbols and diagrams. Section 7. The Search. Days turned into nights. The old house stood silent, shrouded in the shadows of the woods. No one had seen Alia. Her friends and family were worried. They searched everywhere for her. But she was gone. Her best friend, Emily, refused to give up. She knew Alia wouldn't just disappear. Emily remembered Alia talking about her grandmother's house. She decided to go investigate. Emily drove to the edge of the woods. She parked her car and stepped out. The trees loomed over her, their branches intertwined, blocking out the sun. Emily took a deep breath and started walking. The house was even creepier than she imagined. The windows were dark, like empty eyes. Emily shivered. She walked towards the front door. Section 8. A Ghastly Reflection. Emily cautiously stepped inside the house. The air was thick with dust, and the silence was deafening. She called out for Alia, but only her own echo answered. She made her way through the darkened rooms, her heart pounding with each creak of the floorboards. Then she saw it, a faint glow emanating from the attic door. Emily slowly climbed the stairs. As she pushed open the attic door, A chill ran down her spine. The room was dim, lit only by a strange ethereal light coming from a silver-framed mirror propped against the wall. And in the mirror, a face. Alia's face. But her eyes were wide with terror, her mouth contorted in a silent scream. Section 9. Forever Lost. Emily rushed to the mirror. "Alia!" she cried out, but her friend didn't react. It was like she was frozen, trapped within the icy depths of the glass. Emily reached out to touch the mirror's surface. As her fingers made contact, a jolt of energy surged through her. She gasped, pulling her hand back. The face in the mirror, Alia's face, seemed to flicker for a moment. Her lips moved, forming words Emily couldn't hear. Then, just as quickly, she was gone. The light in her eyes extinguished. Only a faint reflection remained, a haunting reminder of Alia, forever lost within the mirror's grasp. Section 10. The Mirror's Secret. Emily stumbled back from the mirror, her heart pounding. She knew she had to get help, had to tell someone what had happened to Alia. But as she turned to leave, she noticed something on the attic floor. A small, leather-bound book lay open, its pages filled with faded ink and strange symbols. Emily picked it up, recognizing it from the stories Alia had told her about her grandmother's fascination with the occult. As she flipped through the book, her eyes fell upon a passage describing an ancient mirror said to possess a dark power, a power to steal souls and trap them within its reflective depths. Emily closed the book, a chill gripping her heart. She finally understood the chilling truth. Alia wasn't coming back. She was lost, her soul forever bound to the mirror's whisper.